is up, everybody? My name is Mario Pichardo. Welcome to another video. Today I want to talk about, the president. I want to talk about the state of things. And listen, I know the president of the United States is not the be all end all. He's not the, where the buck stops. He has a lot of power. And I think, we depend too much on the federal government. And I think if we look back at the, what the original founders' idea was, state sovereignty was the most important aspect. And so maybe what we need to get back to is a system where we were focusing more on the individuals than we did on the group in terms of the states versus the federal government. And if we spend more time talking about the people, talking about the states, and focusing on state issues, we wouldn't have to depend on the bureaucracies of the federal government, and we'd absolutely have all be living better lives if we can just focus on things at the state level. How can we improve our societies at the local level? We can start by looking at our tax system. What regulation do we have that we don't need, or what regulation should we have? But I'm a believer in light government. I'm a believer in little government, because the more government we have, the more bureaucracy we have, the more power we give to the government. We have two things there. One is it's giving a lot of power to people who, have arguably little accountability. What happens if, a government totally decimates, the housing of, X amount of people because of stupid legislation? What's the worst that happens to them? Oh, they get let go out of office. Well, then another Joe Schmo comes in, does the same thing. Okay, he's out of office now. I mean, it's like, but the destruction is still there. It already happened. We can try to rectify it later on, but then it's like, there's no easy solution, for something like that. I think that we need to focus on, I think that's one of the key tenets of why we need to keep government small. Okay, the longer the government goes on, politicians, to get elected, what are they going to do? Promise more and more free stuff in hopes that the people will just buy it up, eat it up. And the system that we have now is one that I don't think is sustainable. I mean, look at Social Security, for example. We made promises in the past that we just cannot keep. And we need a way to be able to have, conversations about important issues and what really the role of the government can be in terms of its competency. And for anybody who believes that it's the government's role, oh, well, the government has to take care of the people, we should be having equal opportunity. Well, I'm sorry to tell you, as much as it hurts me, that life is not fair. Okay? There's always going to be a rich class and a poor class. And we should not be envious of the things that we don't have. Now, that's not an absolute that I'm saying. In other words, whenever somebody has something that we don't have, it doesn't mean it's right. It doesn't mean it's okay. However, it also doesn't give us the right to just take something from someone else. Okay? Some people are born in poverty. Some people are born with very little to no food in some parts of the world. In some parts of the world, people starve to death. Okay? Their lack of resources is not okay, but it doesn't give us the right to go to this person next door, murder them, and take their food. Go into a store, rob people at gunpoint, and take their resources. It doesn't make that okay. All right? And now we all have to figure out a way to live, right? And, listen, the world is not a perfect place. It's not. But for anybody who thinks that more government is going to be the solution to problems, to be the solution for problems that humans have had all throughout society, doesn't know a thing about history. Because the fact of the matter is every single time that we introduce more and more government spending, bigger and bigger government programs, so on and so forth, we always end up at net zero. We have less than what we started with. And and it eventually leads to a, collapse of the dollar, collapse of the fiat currency of the time. And so, maybe what we need is a return to form where we kind of say, well, hey, this wasn't working for us. Maybe we need to go backwards, try something else out. One of the things that I really picked up on when I was reading Mike Maloney, who wrote Gold and Silver, A Guide to Investing in Gold and Silver, uh, he was talking a lot about money, the monetary system, or the rise and fall of civilizations in terms of their monetary policy. And one of the most fascinating things that I picked up from that read, I mean, truly, really something of a paradigm shifter in terms of, how you think about people and societies, was that, it was always the same thing that happened to people. They'd get a lot of money. They'd go to war. They'd spend it in social programs. All the surplus, they'd lose it rapidly. And then, they'd really end up spending themselves into oblivion. They debase their money. Whatever the actual details or the techniques, they always follow the same high level idea. And it just goes in that way, in like a cycle. But every single time, the dollar always goes to zero. The people always mess up that way. And they don't remember their mistakes, or they don't learn from their mistakes. So, twice removed, 2 generations after, 3 generations after, it just happens again and again and again. Where there's this rise of people saying, politicians saying, oh, we'll give you more and more stuff and everything will be good and everything will be and the people buy into it, of course, because, free stuff in the short term is good for you, even if it's bad for the rest of society 20, 30 years from now. It's a fact of the matter that we can't really feel or, really understand what we're going to feel in 20, 30 years. And because we can't feel it, it doesn't really feel real. And therefore, you kind of justify it to yourself to say, hey, it's fine. We'll just live our lives now, worry about that then, and everything will be hunky dory. And that's a lot of the time what happens. And so when you have that kind of firm understanding that, okay, well, if this is how humans function, over decades, they're predictable. Can predict what'll happen in the group. We'll predict what the responses are, and then we can kind of see what'll happen, and it's always going to be the same. So we know that there's going to be, a collapse of the dollar. We know that that these social programs are going to make us bankrupt. We know we can say with absolute certainty that politicians are going to promise us more free stuff in order to get elected, unless we start to change something about our system fundamentally, how we elect people into office. And, the frustrating thing when you kind of learn about that is you look around and you say, well, what are we doing then? Because we're acting as if we don't know. And, granted, for a lot of, for most people, they don't know that. And so you don't really blame them for what they don't know. But then you think about, well, maybe we shouldn't be the ones who are deciding what's best for the entire group and putting restrictions on certain groups of people. I mean, let's just look at history. Look at the Holocaust. Look at the Japanese internment camps. Let's look at the dropping of the Nagasaki, all these bombs, and kind of turn around and say, okay, well, listen, we're not bastions of, morality. Humanity has a very dark past, but also humanity is very stupid because it doesn't look back to see the things that it's already done that were stupid, realize that they're not much different from those people who came before them. I'm sorry, but you did not grow the extra chromosome. You didn't have the extra 500 IQ points that your ancestors didn't have. And so you do not have this kind of, completely brand new, as a lot of, I'm sorry, but, you progressive liberals believe you do, that society, that you've just been so blessed by the gods to have attained this ascendant wisdom to know what is and what isn't good for our society, like the pushing of the LGBT movement and things like that. You don't have, I'm sorry, and so to see them, oh, well, we need to have this, oh, don't tell this is just a gender role. It's not. Look at a woman's biology. It's not a gender role. Women have a lot more estrogen than men do. They have a lot more physical fat than men do. They respond differently to storing food than men do. You know, I'm sorry, there's differences. That's life. Okay. Life, nobody's fair, nobody's equal in life. Okay. People are at the top, people are at the bottom, people are skinny, people are fat, people are black, people are brown, people are, whatever. This is how life is. Okay. Some people aren't gonna have an arm. Some people are gonna be born deformed. Some people are gonna be stillborn. That's how it is. And so there's kind of leftist, ideology that all things should and will forever be equal. You have to be politically correct. I mean, they're just trying to establish this worldview out of nowhere of these concepts that are completely evil to a society. And I'll tell you why I say that. You can't have a society in which you say that it's okay to be one thing, and then it's also equally okay to be something else, and then it's also equal, but there's no potential differentiation between any of these things. And the reason that it doesn't work is because, well, then going by that same logic, there's nothing wrong with being a rapist. And this is what they're trying to do with pedophilia now, by the way, is they're trying to say, oh, because there was an article that came out recently just talking more about it. Listen how they start to sweep it under the rug. Oh, it's not a big deal. It's not fine about this. So a study comes out, and the study says, pedophiles should not be, arrested for their crimes. And it's like, whoa, it's like, okay, well, first off, that's crossing a big red line. We live in a society that used to value children the way that they used to value fathers. They used to be important. But now to kind of, start to hypersexualize kids, Teen Vogue came out and they kind of said, it's okay for children to be prostitutes, essentially. And this is a scary time. But I'm telling you, this is what leftist ideology brings out into society. They try to say there's no difference between good and evil. And in that way, they're promoters of evil. They're promoters of evil because they think that evil is just a social construct. I mean, they're just so woke that they know what the good and the bad for a society is. And I'll be the last person to have Teen Vogue tell my daughter what she should not do. But this is the society that's pushed because we as Americans have been lazy. Have allowed ourselves to get curtailed. But not just Americans, look worldwide. Look at Korea. Look at South Korea. I mean, look at the pushing of all these superficial status symbols, media. It's like everybody's running away from real life into cartoons, into animes, into movies, and myself to a degree as well. It's a lot easier to escape than it is to deal with real problems. But our society is going to go to nothing. It's going to go to nothing. It already doesn't value men. If I stand here and try to tell most people, it's up to us as men to stand up and do something, that doesn't even sound right when I say it. It already sounds bad because that's what this leftist group has kind of brought into the group. So this is bad. And they say it often enough, you start to believe it. This is not how it was. This is not how it was decades and decades ago. But all of a sudden we found this we've kind of become ascendant in our ideology. And, we realize that civilizations for thousands and thousands of years of human civilization have been so dumb that they haven't been able to realize that men and women are equal. Oh, man. These youngins, they really kind of crack the... you can't help but make fun of it because it's like, who are you, at your 20 years old, living with your parents, to be here telling the world, what it means to be, the lives that they should live, the lives that they have to live, that that this can't do this, that, I'm outraged. Maybe I live in a glass house. I shouldn't throw stones. I live with my parents as well. But the thing is I just can't condone a lot of this leftist ideology precisely because it's counterculture to what works. It's counterculture to what has always worked, and it clearly leads to a destabilization of society. Look at what they're pushing now, for example. You don't need men. What happens when you don't have men in the house? Crime skyrockets. Who steps in? The government for arrests, for social programs, for X, Y, and Z. So what happens? Government gets even more control, which is exactly what they want. These Democrats, they won't stop. And they want you to be dependent. Why? Because you vote for them. And they'll give you more free stuff. And so you become even more dependent. And then what happens? Eventually it becomes communism. Because that's what communism is. When the government decides you're worth to the group. Socialism is right. So I'm telling you, man, socialism is just a small flip to communism. Communism is evil. And so is socialism. But the more that the stupider a society gets, the more of its own power it's willing to give away. I'll tell you right now, there's no such thing as a free lunch. And I'm not just talking about in terms of taxes, because when you get social programs, obviously they get paid from somewhere. But there's no such thing as a free lunch. You can't just give the government control or power or the authority to give out food stamps, to give out X, Y, and Z, to give out X, Y, and Z, to give out X, Y, and Z, and expect that it's not going to have a societal cost. Giving out more food stamps means a little bit more. Look, and there are genuinely people who need food stamps. I'm not saying we shouldn't have food stamps. I'm just trying to explain an idea with one concept. Okay, look, you have food stamps. Yes, some people take it. Yes, a lot of people take it who need it, and it's very good that they have it. But then you also have people who game the system. You have people who use it in the back end to make more money. You have people who work less or who are demotivated now because they have the option to use it. And so you kind of have all these unintended side effects or side consequences of this system. And then over time, people kind of become dependent on it. And they get the welfare, and they get the WIC, and they get this. I was reading an article the other day about how, people, a lot of immigrants who come over, they sign up for it, they get it, and they actually end up selling it back to other people at a lower rate. They try to undercut the government. They undercut the free market for this item. Look, that's human nature. That's always going to happen. You're always going to have chinks in the system. That's exactly why the system should be as lean and small as possible. Because the more power we give, the more of this that we're going to, they're just not going to produce the same way that the private sector is going to produce. And this other thing that leftists push for is they want to have equality of outcome. In other words, if I study for 13 years to whatever, 20 years to be a doctor, and you study, let's say, 2 weeks to work at ShopRite, according to leftists, everybody should be making relatively the same amount. Because if I make more money than you make, then I must be evil. Then I must have stolen it. That I must have, in other words, in the eyes of the leftists, their envy, there's no possible way other than me being a bad person that I have more money than you. This is how socialism starts. Of course, there has to be envy. Of course, there has to be fighting. Of course, there has to be, people at each other's throats. Now, it doesn't mean that people who are rich don't take advantage of people. It doesn't mean that they don't do bad things. It doesn't mean any of these things. However, it also does not mean that you are owed something because your neighbor has 5 Bentleys, okay? Just because your neighbor has 5 Bentleys doesn't mean you deserve 5 Bentleys too. That's not what it means. As much as the left, as much as these socialists want you to think that their ideology is evil, and all throughout history, it's turned into destitution, disease, death, and on a large scale. Socialism has never worked, and socialism never will work because it can't work, because it won't work. I hope that we can go back to a system where we kind of are. What's happened is a huge cultural shift. And I think that the cultural shift really happened on the back of saying, hey, it's okay if we don't, it's okay for us to experiment and try new things and go crazy and, with the introduction of um, the pill that prevents a woman from getting pregnant, oh, let's just go, let's devalue marriage. Let's devalue family. Let's devalue the father. And really what you're starting to see is a societal breakdown because we've said the dad doesn't matter. Of course the dad matters. The dad matters a hell of a lot. The dad is half of the family. And this is what the left wants. Be a victim. Here, it's like the left is like the witch with the poison apple, who offers it to Snow White. And Snow White takes it because she believes that she's naive and she doesn't know better. She hasn't studied history. And so she takes the apple and she bites it and she gets poisoned. That's what happens in society over the long term. And one of the most frustrating things to see is people who don't know their history claim that they do, and they go down there, take there, and they bite the apple. And they push this ideology, knowing very little to nothing, like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. And what ends up happening? Well, what ends up happening is what always happens. They do it, they mess up, they made a mistake, but of course it's not their fault. They'll blame that it was something else, something in the interim that happened that messed it up, that screwed it all up. They never take responsibility, they never take accountability, and the issue never gets fixed. It becomes someone else's problem now, and they never get blamed for it, they never take credit for it, for the damage that's been done. It's just like, oh, and that's all that has. It's not even a slap on the wrist. It's just like, it was because of something else. And that's frustrating because you start to see so many people suffer, so many bad things happen, and on the back of what? So yeah, it's frustrating. Yeah, it's totally not ideal, totally not fun. A fun experience, a fun thing to go through, but that's kind of just how it is. And that's why we need to keep, I really think we need to keep government as small as possible because it's just going to mess more things up. Capitalism is not a great system. Of course it's not. We need regulation. Of course we do. Do we need antitrust? I believe we do. What happens when a corporation gets so big like Google? They control so many different facets of people's lives. Their email, which of course Gmail reads your email. I'm sorry. They do. Okay. They have a chat app. If you use their chat app, of course they're taking all that stuff. You have an Android phone, of course they're logging everything that you do on Android. And you think when they come out the new updates on Android, they're not adding more things to watch you on? Use Google Maps. There's this one video, this one guy. He was with somebody else who was like a hacker, like security guy, and they did an experiment where they took one of they had two phones. One phone was on airplane mode, the other one was on or whatever. They turned it off or whatever. And the guy walks around the city or whatever, comes back home, connects them both, and the guy, and so that the security guy, he knows how to take the information that when you turn the phone on or you turn off airplane mode, you know what I mean, connect it back on. He knows how to get a copy of the data that's being sent to Google. And so he does it, and he sees what data. He actually finds out that when you put your phone in airplane mode for privacy reasons, it actually sends more data to Google. And what kind of data do they send? Well, you can probably guess. They send your location information down to the second, I believe it is. Where you were, how long you've been there, where you went next, where you were before that, all that stuff's being logged by Google. Of course, I'm sure, you're sure the websites you go to, the apps you go to, the patterns you go through, all that stuff is being logged up in the cloud. It's being logged up by Google. And you think that's weird. Now they're coming out with the gaming platform so they can have even more data on you. God forbid, can you imagine if Google Plus had taken off? Google's social media website, like a Facebook competitor. Can you imagine if Google had that much more information on people? Google already controls all of AdWords, which is, I believe it's like half of the advertising on the internet, or even more, is controlled by Google. The search engine, of course. I mean, listen, Google's a behemoth. Google has its hands in everything. The Drive, If you store, your files with Google Docs, if you need a word processor, if you live in an area, Google can be your ISP. I mean, Google's like this behemoth, and it's not just Google, Facebook, and all these other companies. So this is why we need regulation. Listen, we need antitrust. We need a way to tell these companies you can only do so many things. We have to protect the consumer, because we know that if we let these companies go wild, they're always trying to make more money, always trying to get more control, more power, more lobbying. So we need some level of government to be able to regulate these industries. Pharmaceutical companies, you can't sell, vaccines or drugs without being, held liable for any damages that are caused by poison in your vaccine. Oh, wait, excuse me. Vaccine manufacturers are not responsible if vaccine causes damage to you. In fact, your government is responsible. And there's a hidden court called the vaccine court to deal with it that no one knows about. But of course, you have to follow the rhetoric. You have to follow the narrative. Vaccines are safe. Get your vaccines. They're all good for you. Doesn't matter that there's what's in them, or those stories you've heard of what's in them. Those are all false. It's nothing but rainbows and fun and fluffiness. And that's the story, and that's usually the story that you're told. And so I think the most that a citizen can do is to kind of be on the front lines and say, hey, I don't appreciate this. I don't believe in this. Hey, Google, stop censoring people on YouTube. Stop taking websites out of the search engine, out of the search bar, out of the search whatever. You're not the arbiter of what people can or cannot see. You should not be, at least. And with new industry, with new technological advancements and industries, we need more. Then comes the time for more regulation. And look, clearly what we're seeing with this huge censorship, this huge wide net of censorship across many social media platforms against conservatives, is the green light. It's time to put regulations on these companies. Don't let them go free willy. It's not going to go well. It's not going to be the best for all of us. It's not going to be a good idea. It's not going to be good, I'm telling you. So there's definitely things we can do. I hope that, we can do something about it. Because I don't want to, none of us wants to live in a world where our whole lives are controlled by the government. They have this information, but also not by a private corporation. We don't want to become a corporate oligarchy. Where just a few big corporations, multinationals, are deciding, what we can or cannot see. The technocracy of sorts by these tech companies through how we can communicate on social media platforms, for example. I'm not having it. Sorry. And so, but this is our choice. Listen, as consumers, we're the ones who use Facebook. We're the ones who use Twitter. We're the ones who use that stuff. You don't agree with the censorship? Don't use the platform. It's as simple as that. And then people turn around and they say, but I'm just one person. Yeah, you're just one person. But don't use the platform. Because how do you think, the societal movement came in about, fathers being useless? You think everybody just picked it up? No, it was one person at a time. Then a couple people. Then a couple dozen. Then a couple. Stop using it. You don't believe in it. Because all that whole huge wave of people who started pushing that indoctrination about fathers being useless were all made out of individual people, believe it or not. So that's all I have for you guys today. If you guys enjoyed, please like and share as much as you can. It really helps with getting the message out there and pushing through with the algorithms. But with that, guys, I'll see you in the next one. Everybody take it easy. Have a great night. I'll see you guys next time. Peace.